Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this Bidders Conference for the Apprenticeship Building America and Pennsylvania Grants Initiative. The purpose of this meeting is to provide you with information as detailed in the ABA Notice of Grant Availability, which was released on October 5th, and of course to allow for questions from you. My name is Sam Premack, and I am a Workforce Development Analyst for the Apprenticeship and Training Office. I will be managing this grant program, serving as your point of contact for questions and technical assistance. With me is Director Tara Lowe, Director of the ATO. We also have John Paul, Program Manager for Keystone Development Partnership, who will be supporting the ATO and providing coordination of this initiative. We also have James Chicharo with KDP as well. And I believe Christy DeWitt, who is a Workforce Development Supervisor with the ATO. I thank them for joining and providing support during this conference. There are a few items that I'd like to cover before we begin. I want to let you know that this bidders conference is being recorded. We ask that you enter your questions using the chat feature. You can feel free to enter your questions throughout the conference. We will provide answers to these questions during the question and answer period. Everything that is being covered today is included in the NGA, apart from the questions and answers, which will be transcribed and provided in the near future, along with a recording of this bidders conference. So with all of that said, I'd now like to begin with a brief overview and introduction of this initiative. Since its inception, the ATO has been working to modernize and build Pennsylvania's apprenticeship system. Our goal is to enable more employers to leverage registered apprenticeship programs to develop a workforce with career paths into quality jobs. Investment in this work is particularly needed now as the state's economy continues to recover from pandemic-related challenges, including the need to train and onboard workers. The ATO is focused on expanding apprenticeship for occupations and industries in critical supply chains, including logistics, manufacturing, and transportation, as well as clean energy, public service, healthcare, childcare, construction, and technology, to name a few. Modernizing and building out Pennsylvania's apprenticeship system will prepare the state for the anticipated increase in demand for apprenticeships due to support over the coming years from Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funding. While many local workforce development boards have already started developing strategies for apprenticeship in their regions, updated guidance on Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act regional and local plans requires all workforce development boards to formalize these plans in the future. These include strategies to connect WIOA eligible individuals to apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship opportunities and support them as they complete their training. Registered apprenticeship is one of the most effective strategies for engaging employers and increasing performance outcomes for the public workforce system. Apprentices begin full-time employment right away, so connecting job seekers with registered apprenticeship programs can help local areas meet their targets for the WIOA primary indicators. Earlier this year, the ATO applied for and received an Apprenticeship Building America grant from the U.S. Department of Labor with a goal of helping to embed a focus on apprenticeship within the Commonwealth's workforce system. Involvement from workforce development boards is vital in this effort, not only in supporting apprentices, but also in providing the leadership necessary to bring key regional partners together to support the group-sponsored apprenticeship model. Your sustained commitment to promoting apprenticeship as a service to both employers and job seekers will help accelerate the growth of local apprenticeship ecosystems that are supported by the ATO. To help unlock this potential, L&I is making approximately $2.75 million in funding available to support workforce development boards in their efforts to expand apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship opportunities in their region. Award recipients will receive technical assistance from the ATO's ABA grant coordinator to develop and implement apprenticeship plans for their workforce development areas and meet the required outcomes of this grant opportunity. So now we'll take a look at the grant opportunity goals and priorities. The goals of this initiative are to help workforce development boards develop or enhance an actionable registered apprenticeship and registered pre-apprenticeship plan for their workforce development area, to engage career and technical centers within their areas to develop plans for pre-RA to RA pipelines, develop new and expand existing registered apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs, provide reimbursement funds to support related technical instruction and support service costs for apprentices and pre-apprentices recruited as part of the new local plan strategies. A priority of this grant program is reaching underrepresented populations to increase equity through supporting pathways to quality employment. Applicants are reminded that equity is distinguished from equality, whereas equality means providing the same to all. Equity means recognizing that not all start from the same place and steps must be taken to address existing imbalances. Eligible applicants for this grants initiative are workforce development boards. Applicants must demonstrate the ability to bring together regional partners to support the expansion of apprenticeship. The applicant must also demonstrate the ability to coordinate the project design and implementation of the project, manage the project budget, and implement a strategy to collect, analyze, and report performance outcomes. Workforce development boards may apply under this opportunity in 3 ways. First, you may apply as a single workforce development board. Under this option, a single workforce development board applies for a single award of $183,333. You may apply as part of a single award partnership. Under this option, multiple workforce development boards may partner to meet the outcomes for a single award. Only one strategic plan would be developed for a single award partnership. And finally, you may apply under a multiple award partnership. Under this option, multiple workforce development boards may apply jointly for a larger total award to support a larger regional initiative. So for instance, multiple workforce development boards may choose to jointly fund a new apprenticeship-focused full-time equivalency that would serve multiple workforce development boards and workforce development areas. A lead workforce development board applicant must be identified for all partnership applications. It is also highly encouraged that partnering workforce development boards have close geographical proximity. So now I just want to take a moment and focus on the multiple award partnership application option. It is important to note that an increase in funding would result in a commensurate increase in expected outcomes. So for example, 2 workforce development boards applying for a $366,666 award would help develop 2 RA and 2 pre-RA programs and serve 54 apprentices. 3 workforce development boards applying for a $549,999 award would help develop 3 RA and 3 pre-RA programs and serve 81 apprentices, and so on. We've included a chart to outline these commensurate increases. You can see here on this slide. You can also find a copy of this chart as part of Appendix J of the NGA. Regardless, please note that the ATO will work with each workforce development board applying under this option to develop an apprenticeship strategic plan for their workforce development board area. The Workforce Development Board applicant will serve as the fiscal agent for the project. Please note for workforce development boards that choose to partner and apply under this initiative, a lead must be identified to serve as the fiscal agent. And again, as stated earlier, this opportunity is funded by an Apprenticeship Building America grant awarded to Pennsylvania by the USDOL. So now we'll take a look at the project outcomes per grantee. The purpose of this grant is to provide additional sources of support to workforce development boards as they increase their engagement with and support of apprenticeship in their workforce areas. The majority of ABA funded is intended to support apprenticeship-focused workforce development board staff time to manage the completion of grant outcomes. Specifically, workforce development boards awarded under this initiative must develop or enhance an actionable RA and pre-RA plan for their workforce development board area. The strategic plans will align with and potentially be used for modification to the recently adopted WIOA 3-year local and regional plans. Plans will also utilize the latest labor market information, which will be gathered in partnership with the Center for Workforce Information and Analysis. And at a minimum, each Workforce Development Board's apprenticeship strategy document will identify sectors and occupations of interest that align with recently completed local plans, as well as current labor market information, existing programs and stakeholders already active in RA and pre-RA in the region, including group-sponsored programs already engaging multiple employers, other stakeholders that can be engaged to expand RA and pre-RA, such as business education partnerships, industry partnerships, and other business associations. And then next steps to expanding the local apprenticeship ecosystems with a particular focus on building capacity of the state's workforce system and developing career and technical center-led pre-RA programs. Finally, recruitment plans for non-traditional and traditional apprentices. This includes development of strategies to recruit women, people of color, limited English speakers, veterans, older workers, and other underrepresented groups into apprenticeship programs. Workforce development boards awarded under this initiative must also identify an individual within the local workforce development area who is responsible for and has the support to achieve their apprenticeship goals. The designated individual will work closely with the ABA grant coordinator to ensure that all outcomes and deliverables are met. Awardees must also engage CTCs within their areas to develop plans for pre-RA to RA pipelines. The ATO is already collaborating with many CTC programs around the Commonwealth. The ABA grant coordinator will help workforce development boards tap into projects already underway and integrate the boards into these conversations if they are not already participating. Under this initiative, grantees must also help develop and register at least one RA and one pre-RA. The Workforce Development Board is not expected to serve as the sponsor for RA or pre-RA programs, but instead provides support during the development and implementation of new programs. Such activities may include convening partners, providing labor market information, providing participant recruitment channels through WIOA Title I programs, and other activities that leverage the Workforce Development Board's central role as a workforce intermediary within their areas. Pre-RAs must directly lead to registered apprenticeship programs during the grant period of performance. Pre-RAs funded under this grant should ensure that the skills and competencies being developed align with industry needs. Grantees must also use funding to offset on-the-job training and/or related technical instruction costs and provide wraparound support services to support the new enrollments of at least 27 registered apprentice and 27 pre-apprentice participants. Per project, 10% of awarded funds must be used as one-time incentives for employers to offset OJT and RTI costs for participants. Reimbursements for OJT and/or RTI will be provided at a maximum rate of $1,000 per apprentice over the course of the period of performance. Per project, 20% of awarded funds must be used to provide support services to registered apprentice and pre-apprentice participants. Incentive and support service funding should support the enrollment of at least 27 apprentices and at least 2 existing and 1 new registered apprenticeship program. At least half of all new apprentices enrolled must come from underrepresented populations. And at least 8 of new apprentices enrolled must complete their training during the grant period. Support service funding should also support the enrollment of at least 27 pre-apprentices and at least 2 existing and 1 new pre-apprenticeship program. At least half of all new pre-apprentices enrolled must come from underrepresented populations. At least a quarter of new pre-apprentices enrolled must complete their training during the grant period. A support services policy will be required for each workforce development area. The ATO will provide a template for the policy, and the ABA grant coordinator will assist workforce development boards with implementation of the policy. And just as a reminder, if multiple workforce development boards apply under the multiple award partnership option, the increase in funding, again, would result in a commensurate increase in expected outcomes, particularly number 1, number 4, and number 5. Again, we ask that you please refer to Appendix J of the NGA for additional information on outcomes associated with multiple award partnerships. Now, taking a look at evaluation criteria, applications will be reviewed and evaluated by an interagency team. I ask that you please refer to the NGA for specifics on the evaluation criteria. We have, however, included a breakdown on this slide with associated points for each section. The Apprenticeship Building America and Pennsylvania NGA and all related materials are available on L&I's grants website. The link is included on this slide. Applications must be complete, including all required documents, and submitted by 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, November 4th, 2022. An electronic copy of the application and all required components must be emailed to the ATO grants at pa.gov resource account, and it must include the email subject, Apprenticeship Building America and PA application. Applications must be single-spaced on 8.5 by 11-inch paper with 1-inch margins using 11-point Calibri font. Application documents must be in PDF format with the exception of the budget form, which must be provided in Excel format. Course page numbers must be provided in the footer. Documents may not include internet addresses that provide information or links necessary to review the application. Documents must not include any proprietary or sensitive business information, as Pennsylvania may make it available to the public. Incomplete applications or applications that do not meet these specifications will not be evaluated or scored. If a project narrative is more than 10 pages, evaluators will only review the first 10 pages. So now I just want to take a moment and direct you to the application components that must be completed. First, we have our project summary cover page that can be found in Appendix A of the NGA. Next, we have our application form, which is available in Appendix B of the NGA. The project narrative must include details addressing all of the evaluation criteria, which can be found on pages 7 through 9 of the NGA. Applicants must submit a detailed budget that includes expenditures by line item. The budget will be evaluated based on evaluation criteria. And in terms of cost reasonableness and the relationship to proposed activities. Budgets must be for the time period covering January 1st, 2023 through March 31st, 2026. The budget will also become the financial basis for any grant award, including making cost reimbursement payments over the course of the project. The budget form is available in Appendix C of the NGA, and it also includes some examples. Also, we ask that you use Appendix D of the NGA, which focuses on FSR cost categories as an additional resource completing the budget form to assist with titling and defining each available cost category. In addition, information on allowable and unallowable costs can be found on page 11 of the NGA, and we've also included information on program expenses that can be found on page 12 of the NGA. And here we've included a snapshot of the budget form. You can see that the budget type is separated into admin and program costs with specific subcategories for administration, career and supportive services, and training. Again, the FSR cost category document will assist with titling and defining cost categories and is an additional resource that we've included in the NGA. Applications must also include a completed budget justification. Each expenditure must be justified by line item, including the cost proposed in each category, as well as any other information to support the budget. Instructions on completing the budget justification can be found in Appendix E of the NGA. Each application must have no more than 5 letters of support. Each letter should state how the proposal will help address the problem and goals of this NGA and its impact on the target populations and community. Applicants must describe desired outcomes of proposed initiatives and how those outcomes will be measured. This component should include measurable goals, outcomes, services, performance indicators, evaluation methods, target numbers to be served, and a timeline to meet the goal or outcome. Applicants should use the goals and outcomes table found in Appendix F of the NGA. And here we've provided a snapshot of the goals and outcomes table to be used. Next, we ask that applicants provide a project timeline, including implementation steps, deliverables, and how those deliverables address the desired outcomes of the project. The timeline should be broken down by each quarter within the grant period, and the timeline template can be found in Appendix G of the NGA. And then for your reference, we've included a snapshot of the timeline template. Applicants must also describe how project partners will sustain the project beyond the grant period. The sustainability plan template is included as Appendix H of the NGA. As alluded to earlier, we also ask that applicants submit written policies and procedures and specifying the types of supportive services allowed, the maximum amount per person, governing the award of supportive services, and must ensure that each supportive service payment are tied to the goals of the specific program and align with the local program's organizational policies. Again, the ATO will be providing a template that can be used in creating these supportive service policies. And finally, pursuant to Executive Order 2021-06, contractors and grantees of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania must certify that they are in compliance with Pennsylvania's unemployment compensation laws, workers' compensation laws, and all applicable Pennsylvania state labor and workforce safety laws. The Worker Protection Certification form is included as Appendix I in the NGA. Apprenticeship programs funded by this grant must be registered in the Commonwealth. Non-registered apprenticeship program will have until September 2023 to finalize their registration or show progress towards the finalization of the registration. The ATO will define making progress towards registration on a case-by-case basis. And then again, as a reminder, additional information on program expenses can be found on pages 12 and 13 of the NGA. LNI anticipates a performance period beginning January 1st, 2023 and ending on March 31st, 2026. Awardees are required to enter into a workforce grant agreement with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Of course, local workforce development board awardees will be funded under their current workforce development area grant agreement with dates of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2024. Additional information can be found on page 14 of the NGA. Grantees will be required to submit program and fiscal progress reports during and upon conclusion of the funded project. All projects will be required to do a pre-evaluation and post-evaluation of the project. All required forms will be supplied by the ATO and will be outlined in the award package. All closeout final reports are to be submitted no later than May 30th, 2026, or within 60 days of full award expenditure, whichever occurs first. For additional information on reporting and evaluation, please see page 15 of the NGA. And so that concludes the specific and general grant information portion of this conference. We will now begin the question and answer portion of the Bidders Conference. Up until the time of this conference, we've received no questions in our resource account. So we're going to focus strictly on those that have been entered using the chat feature. So I am going to exit out and stop sharing my screen for now so I can take a look at those questions. And of course, if anyone needs to elaborate on a question that they've entered in the chat, I ask that you just simply unmute yourself and speak up. If you're calling in using Teams, all you have to do is simply click your unmute icon. If you are calling in by phone, I believe you will need to hit *6 to unmute yourself. As of now, unless I'm wrong, I'm only seeing 3 questions that have come through the chat. We will take them one by one, and I will do my best to provide some answers. The first question is ABA grant funding allowable for pre-apprenticeship and registered apprenticeship programs developed by the same single sponsor, i.e. the CTCs? And then it actually looks like this is a multi-part question. So we'll take it question by question. So again, the first question is ABA grant funding allowable for pre-apprenticeship and registered apprenticeship programs developed by the same single sponsor, i.e. the CTCs? There is nothing in the NGA that prohibits that. So yes, that is allowable. Number 2, is the ABA grant funded by WIOA? If so, is the combination of both WIOA incumbent worker training funds and ABA grant funds for RTI allowable? So the answer to the first part of that question is the ABA grant funded by WIOA. It is not. It is a separate pool of funding through USDOL. However, you do ask, is the combination of both WIOA incumbent worker training funds and ABA grant funds for RTI allowable? Again, there is a certain portion that can be dedicated to cover RTI costs through the ABA grant. There's not necessarily anything that would prevent you from supplementing those funds. So I would see no issue with supplementing those funds with WIOA incumbent worker training funds. But again, we have very specific parameters within the NGA and within the outcomes focusing on funds to support RTI through ABA. The third part of that question is, are program expenses allowable for local apprenticeship plan development by Workforce Development Board staff outside of grant administration?
Sam,
I would actually.
Oh, there we go. I
Sorry,
couldn't hear you.
I'm processing the question, so I apologize. My thought on that is we may have to look into that a bit more, and come back with an answer when we post the question and answer document. Yes, Tara, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer, Sam, but I also would say, Rory, part of this is we're actually calling for someone to be responsible for this. So I don't know if you're considering that. I'm trying to find your question now. If you're considering that grant management or grant administration, in my opinion, that's not grant administration.
Tara, it's Rory. Just to further explain a little bit, the discussion that we had last week when we first perused the NGA was that we do have a registered apprenticeship policy in place here locally for use of incumbent worker training funds, but based on the NGA, there's going to be a much more work required to develop a full-blown local apprenticeship plan, and rather than contracting that out to a third party for program expenses, we were wondering whether, say, for me to be the person that's actually developing and writing the plan, would we be able to use program expenses as opposed to only administrative funds for my time?
Yes, and that is the intent, Sam. I don't know if you can share. I'm looking for the NGA too. If you have it right in front of you, maybe you can share the verbiage related to that. Our intent is that part of this funding is used to support kind of a program person for this.
Right. I know on page 21 of Appendix D in section B1, program staff salaries and fringe benefits, it does indicate personnel costs for individuals directly engaged in non-administrative activity. I don't know. I didn't know whether or not that was to include Workforce Development Board staff.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We kind of leave that up to you. Essentially, is maybe it's a Workforce Development Board staff person, maybe it's a CareerLink staff person, but we kind of allow that up to you to make that determination, and then you would put it in your application. Essentially, this is kind of this is our intent with this funding, and this is kind of where that person is coming from.
All right, very good. Thank you, Tara and Sam. I appreciate it very much.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
And
Okay.
and I will say this too, Rory, that if you guys read into it a little bit more when you get to the different eligibility categories, that would be one of the benefits to the third multiple partnership category is if you partner with another board, yes, you're responsible for increased outcomes, but you could potentially combine all of those kind of extra funds that we're suggesting go to a program person to create maybe a full-time apprenticeship program person at the board level. Just kind of brainstorming with you all here.
Got it. Thank you again.
Yep.
Barb, I noticed that your hand is raised. Is that in relation to this question?
Hi, can you hear me okay, Sam?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, actually, this is Dan. I
Okay.
hijacked my wife's computer.
Oh, okay.
So I apologize.
Okay, no problem.
So I do have a question which I entered the chat, but Rory's questions were our primary questions, but I think it was Josie asked a question about applying for less funding, and I added a chat question. It's pertinent now, or I can just hold and let you respond to Josie's questions first.
Let's you know what, we'll stick to the order of the questions as entered into the chat, just for
Great.
the sake of consistency. So
Super, great.
great, thank you. Okay, so I see another question came in from Emily. Can a nonprofit organization apply without a local workforce development board? So this particular opportunity is available only to local workforce development boards as the lead applicant. That's not to say that they cannot partner with nonprofit organizations. You know, we would certainly anticipate that there's going to be a number of stakeholders involved in any given application. However, the lead applicant must be a workforce development board. Moving on to the next question. Can a local workforce development board apply for less funding than what is outlined in the NGA? So I think the technical answer there is yes. However, we have very strict, specific outcomes that we have proposed to the U.S. Department of Labor. So these, award recommendations or caps, if you will, we would strongly advise our applicants to stick to those. Again, that single award, we're looking at $183,333. Again, we've factored in really all facets of the outcomes, looking at the amount being allocated for support services, for RTI, OGT costs. So that number is very, very closely figured, and really is the suggested cap for single awards. Tara, I did see your hand was raised.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, to reiterate what Sam said, you could ask for less funding, but at a super basic, probably too blunt for my own good, you would still be required to meet the same outcomes. So it would certainly behoove you to ensure you're asking for the full amount, so you can effectively distribute incentive funds and support some program salary to help meet your goals.
Thank you, Tara. Moving on to the next question. Would you please define what you are looking for when asking us to expand current programs? So when we say expand, we're talking about enhancing programs that are already currently registered, whether it be an apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship program. And again, by that, that could be anything from enrolling more participants, perhaps perhaps taking a look at the program standards, making any revisions, adjustments, as necessary. There's kind of a wide ranging, but really when we say expand, we're really focusing on those that are currently registered. And again, we are happy to provide information on programs that are currently registered within your regions. I know we have provided that information in the past, and we have that information readily available. So we are, again, happy to provide that if any applicants should need that.
Sam, can I just add on, and you may have said this, I apologize,
Sure.
My internet is a little in and out. At an extremely basic level, we're asking for a certain amount of these funds to be used for reimbursement and offsetting the costs of on-the-job training and RTI costs. So at an extremely basic level, expanding could be assisting and utilizing some of those OJT and RTI, some of that OJT and RTI funding to help an already existing program essentially bring on additional apprentices. Hopefully that's targeted to populations underserved, and there's a few ways to do that effectively. But at a really basic level, that's kind of one of the ways to target expanding initially. And that's our coordinator will help kind of strategize there for any awardees.
Okay, next question. Can we expect continued funding in the future? So with regard to ABA, that funding, obviously has an expiration date. The grant award that we received through USDOL, I should say, again, has a very finite end date. At this time, we're unable to say whether there would be additional funding made available through the ABA initiative. So, the short answer there is continued ABA funding beyond the period of performance for this particular grant initiative is not guaranteed. And it's unfortunately a bit of a hard question to answer at this time. Again, we do ask that all applicants provide a sustainability plan. Because, as with any grants initiative, we always like the funding to kind of be the launch pad for any initiatives or programs at the local level or regional level. So again, we're looking to see what plans you would have to sustain a program without necessarily relying on continued ABA funding, which at this point, it's I think too soon to say whether there's any opportunity for additional funding via ABA. I know that's not really a fully committed answer, but it's kind of a harder question to answer at this point. So again, I would just reiterate that, focus on that sustainability plan, look at other avenues to continue, to continue your projects and your initiatives. Okay, next question. Similar to Jody's question, would ATO entertain a planning-only application from a local workforce development board at a modest dollar amount? Again, the answer is kind of similar to, oh yes, Dan.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going with the answer. And I first of all, let me just say, coming into this, thank you, period. This is a real great opportunity. I will say in our first read through, my initial take is that I'm concerned that the amount of funding available to a local board is not going to be sufficient to cover all the ground we're trying to cover with both planning and then some pretty extensive outcomes. That remains to be seen, but that obviously goes into our calculus in terms of, as a local board, determining whether we apply singly or whether we try to quickly find some other partners and put in a multi-board proposal, which, as you guys have pointed out, doesn't drop the outcomes, but the planning piece is a huge opportunity for us in Berks County. So that was kind of my question, and it has to do with, I know you guys are on deliverables for the feds, but have you considered what happens if you don't get 15 applicants at the amount that you're giving? Would you be able to distribute the money to other boards? But if so, I'm assuming they would get increased numbers that they would have to achieve. So am I reading that? And so it's a lot, but am I reading the lay of the land correctly on that?
Yes, I would say you are. And again, I think that's why we took a look at the multiple award partnerships. Certainly as an opportunity to collaborate and perhaps enhance the deliverables. It's yet to be seen. Obviously we're kind of on the front end of the whole process, the NGA process, and so it's tough for us to say, in terms of the number of applicants, number of applications, what's being proposed. But again, we would highly encourage anyone who's concerned about the deliverables to, take a look at other close regional partners and have some planning meetings and discuss how you can make it work. Would highly encourage that. Tara, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide maybe some insight there. So I did want to encourage everybody to, just kind of following up on Rory's comment earlier and my comments that I put in the chat, just kind of do the math in a sense, because if looking at the full award amount, there is a certain amount that we're requiring that you use as reimbursement funds and supportive service funds, right? Our hope is that those reimbursement funds and supportive service funds are going to help incentivize new apprentices. And then there is a remaining amount. So the hope there then would be that that remaining amount would support a staff person to drive these efforts. It depends what your pay scales look like, right? But I don't know that remaining amount for a single award is going to cover someone full time, but I believe it will cover a pretty significant amount of time to have someone kind of dedicated to assisting and meeting these grant goals. The other thing I want to keep in mind is we have a full-time grant coordinator dedicated to this. Or excuse me, not even grant, it's beyond a SAM, right? It's someone dedicated to being a liaison between our office and you guys. So part of their role is going to be helping get you some labor market information, helping create strategy, helping create a plan around what programs to go after to expand, what employers to maybe go to build one new program. And I hear the barriers. I don't want anyone to think I'm just kind of poo-pooing everything. But I really want to again reiterate, please look at those emails we sent out. Most of your local areas already have at least one registered apprenticeship program in the pipeline and at least one pre-apprenticeship program in the pipeline. Theoretically, right there, you've met your new program goal, right? And also, each one of your local areas, I don't think there's one local area that doesn't have significantly more than 27 active apprentices already right now. So theoretically, you could use some of those existing programs and use those reimbursement funds to expand. So again, I am by no means trying to downplay the barriers or any apprehensive kind of apprehension here. But I really truly think that these outcomes are more than attainable. And my pledge to you guys is that's why we put a liaison. We've built a liaison into this. This is just an additional support to you. So not only are we hoping that we know there's going to be extra funds to utilize to support a staff person beyond administrative. This would be for program. But then we also are dedicating a staff person specifically to these ABA efforts. So they're going to be a liaison between our office and all of you, and there, will not be a significant amount of awards. So that person is going to be full-time until the end of this performance period. So you should be able to have a lot of support from that person if that kind of helps alleviate any concern.
Tara, I just let me finish by saying thank you, because you've been great about the approach that you've taken with this grant since it was awarded to you guys. So, we just have to look at it really carefully because we're just not we're not going to submit an application unless we share that confidence that we can hit the outcomes. And probably one of the bigger ones is going to be the 50% requirement with barriers, just given the challenges we have in expanding it. It's the right goal. I'm wondering if that metric is if that number is not a little bit on the high side. So, I mean, that's just, we don't know, right? Because that's why we're doing the grant, right, Tara?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I appreciate the concern, Dan, and you really taking this seriously. I mean, 100%.
Thank you.
Rory, I believe I see your hand raised.
Yeah,
Is
thanks,
that is that in relation to this question?
Actually, it is. I think Tara may have already answered my question.
Oh, okay.
And it was with regard to the expansion aspect. And I believe, Tara, you mentioned that if we are able to reactivate dormant registered apprenticeships in our area, that would be considered an expansion.
Yes, or even if they're not dormant and you're going to just use some of the reimbursement funds to support bringing on additional apprentices, that would be expansion.
Perfect. Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So moving on, we still have a few questions we need to get through. The next question, when will the ATO share the apprenticeship support services template? I'm really glad you asked that question. So as you know, within the NGA, we do ask for support services if applicable. Obviously, that's a major part of this initiative. As stated in the conference within the NGA, the ATO will be drafting up a template that can be used. I think obviously in time for your proposals to be submitted, I think that's more of a deliverable that we will work with you on once awards are made. However, within all workforce development areas, we're well aware that you would have current supportive service policies. So we do ask that you submit your current supportive service policies with your applications. Again, the support services template that we will work with you on is actually a kind of a after the fact, once awards are made, process. But rest assured that for those who are awarded, that template will be delivered very soon. So I can't give you an exact date as it's in process, but again, for the purposes of your proposal, we just ask that you provide your current supportive service policies, your general supportive service policies. Okay, next question. If multiple local workforce development boards apply together, is it intended that their goals and budgets mirror each other exactly, or would you anticipate and allow some differences while still intending to partner? Sorry, as I process this question. Excuse the pause here. I think with regard to the goals, again, we do look at that commensurate increase in terms of the outcomes. We are going to probably, it's very likely that the goals would mirror each other from region to region. The budgets, I think, may not necessarily, but again, as we alluded to earlier, um, we do, we do have a specific dollar amount in mind. When with regard to a single award, and of course, with the multiple award partnership, you're going to also see that commensurate increase with the budget as well. I don't. So I think the short answer there is we don't expect them to mirror each other exactly. There's always some wiggle room, but in terms of an overall dollar amount, um, we are looking for that to be reflective of what's included in the NGA. I see Tara's comment here, focusing on project outcomes per grantee. Thank you for providing that. A few more questions here. Are people who are disabled, low income, and part of the LGBTQIA community considered part of underrepresented groups? My apologies, I'm referencing the NGA. My initial answer to that, my initial response to that is, of course, absolutely. Again, we also encourage the local areas to also take a look at WEO, a priority of service. We of course, want to see alignment with priority of service as well. To clarify, one liaison at ATO to all 22 workforce development boards. Yes, so we will have one ABA grant coordinator who's essentially their full-time job is to provide serve as the liaison between the ATO and the workforce development boards for this initiative.
But as you saw in my answer as well, any board would still have the full support of the ATO team. So the boards and the ABA coordinator from our office will be working
Absolutely.
closely with our ATR team, your regional ATR, your pre-apprenticeship manager, all of them will be incorporated into this process as well. This is just an additional added support specific to this grant.
Thank you for clarifying, Tara.
Mm-hmm,
I always think of it. I always think of it as a given. We are always there as a support as well. Okay, a couple more questions. Are there any restrictions to how the funding is divided or allocated for grant proposals with multiple boards? Kind of similar to an earlier question regarding, do the budgets need to mirror each other? I mean, obviously, we want to be able to invest as much and kind of look at each region equally, even if there is a partnership. So I think, yes, Liz, I see your hands raised.
Yeah, sorry, that was my question.
Yeah.
I think what we're thinking about is if we partner with other local boards, you know, is the split more like 70-30% funding, right? 70% for the other board that has more energy around needing to develop more programs or needing to come up with an apprenticeship strategy. And we then are more of like a supportive board. And we still meet the goals, right? The program outcomes, we still meet that together, but thinking about how do we leverage funds to support the board that maybe doesn't have the local area that doesn't necessarily have as much infrastructure already built.
Thank you for that clarification. I think, and you touched upon an important point is, one thing we really need to see would not be impacted by that would be the outcomes and the goals. So I think collectively within the partnership, if you're meeting those commensurate goals and those outcomes, or based on that commensurate increase, and you're, however, I think the answer there is if you can justify it within your proposal, in terms of why one partner would receive this amount of funding, this partner would receive a certain amount of funding. I think if you could distinguish that and kind of provide that reasoning within your proposal, it certainly would be considered. But again, our concern is making sure that those outcomes aren't necessarily impacted per region. There's Tara's response to the liaison. Again, ATO will always be available to support. Okay, how quickly will this recording be made available? Thank you for sharing. My hope is that the communications team can get this posted to LNI's grants webpage. So where this will be posted as an FYI is along with the NGA posting. We typically include that on the same page. Will questions and answers available from the chat be available as part of the recording? Absolutely. We with any NGA, at least from the ATO's perspective, we always transcribe the questions and answers. Again, another reason why we record it, not only so we're able to post the recording, but so that we're able to transcribe all the questions from the chat, but also any questions that we get verbally as well. So that will be available. That may take a little more time than getting the recording posted. You're probably looking at probably about a week out. But we will get those posted immediately, as soon as we can. And then Tara, you entered into the chat, just a reminder in regard to funding and how to figure out what may be left to support staff costs and other costs as needed. Per project, 10% of awarded funds must be used as one-time incentives for employers to offset OJT and RTI costs for RA participants. Then, of course, reimbursements for OJT and or RTI will be provided at a maximum rate of $1,000 per apprentice over the course of the period of performance. And then finally, per project, 20% of awarded funds must be used to provide support services to RA and pre-RA participants.
Yeah, and I just did, I mean, quickly, I just did the math there.
Sure.
So you can see, and that's not taking other pieces into consideration. There's overhead, there's maybe some other things, but I did the math to show the
Absolutely.
128,000 that could remain to potentially go to salary.
Absolutely. And that appears to be the last of the questions. Again, we thank you for your time this afternoon. I believe we are actually going to entertain questions through our ATO Grants resource account. up until the deadline. That's our standard practice. And so again, I will enter the resource accounts into the chat for your purposes. It's also included in the presentation. And what we will do is, as we receive questions in from, into the resource account, what we will do is update our questions and answers document to include those questions on a weekly basis. And we are happy to do that. So with that, unless there are no other questions, again, we thank you for your time, and we wish you success and luck as you work on your applications, if you choose to do so. And again, please reach out with any questions. Again, we ask that any additional questions be submitted in written format to the ATO Grants resource account. I have just entered that into the chat feature. And everyone have a wonderful afternoon and evening. And thanks again. Bye, everyone.
Thank you both.